Alright, so now we're going to be talking about the 13 British colonies. These are the ones that are going to impact really the United States the most. So, the important dates that you need to know from the 13 British colonies, there's really only 5 or 6 that you absolutely need to know for STAAR, because there's always a couple of them from on the STAAR that are just dates. But 2 of the 6 that you need to know are in the colonies. So the first one is 1607, which is Jamestown, Virginia, being founded. It's the first successful colony. I would put successful in quotations because it really wasn't. But the next one is Plymouth Rock in 1620, which is also where they signed the Mayflower Compact, and we'll talk about that a lot later. So here's a map of the 13 British colonies. I need you to go ahead and write them down, copy them onto your notes. Don't forget to include your color-coded key, with New England, Middle, and Southern being the 3 regions of the 13 colonies. And go ahead and click pause to do this. Alright, so the rest of these founding aren't necessarily in chronological order, which means based on time. It's not going from beginning to end. They are grouped by region, which means they all share characteristics. So we're going to start with the New England colonies. Some of the common characteristics between all of the New England colonies are their geography. They all had rocky soil, they all had long winters, fast-moving rivers, long coastlines, and forested terrain. Now imagine you come over to a new world, and it's just a couple hundred people that fit into a boat with you. What are you going to do for food if you come onto land like this? What are you going to do to make money? So what they end up doing is they fish with those fast-moving rivers, those long coastlines. They lumber mill and they shipbuild with those forested terrain. The fast-moving rivers also helps with lumber milling, which is cutting up trees, cutting up wood in order to make planks of wood that we can build things with. So some of the colonies within these regions we're going to talk about next. But while we're doing that, please remember to fill out to the side of your notes whether each of these colonies were founded for political, economic, or religious reasons. So were they founded for government, which is political? Were they founded for purely money, which is economic? Or were they founded for religious reasons? So Massachusetts is going to be the first one. Remember Plymouth Rock, which you can see in the top right corner. It was founded by a group of Puritans called Pilgrims. Plymouth Rock is in 1620. Again, they wrote the Mayflower Compact. Their mission was to establish the city on the hill. It was kind of a symbolic thing. The higher up on the mountain you are, the higher up on the hill you are, the closer you are to God, and your society is going to follow that. John Winthrop is going to be the leader, and he began recording the history. So he becomes very, very important. They believed in a united church and state. So their church and their government, their religion and their government was the same exact thing. They were together, they were not separate. You had to be a member of the church in order to vote and to be a citizen. If you were not a member of that church, you did not get to be a citizen and you did not get to vote or have a say in your government. Crimes were considered sins. So think about all the basic Christian sins that I'm sure most of us know a few of them. They were considered crimes. And many people were banished from this colony. We're going to talk about a lot of those in our story times. Education, here's the really good thing that came out of Massachusetts. They believed that people and children, mostly children, had to learn to read so they could study the Bible. So because of this, they started colleges, they started schools. And the first college they established was Harvard University, right outside of Boston now, modern-day Boston. So their major city in Massachusetts is still to this day going to be Boston, and it's a port city as well. Rhode Island is the next colony that we're going to talk about. Roger Williams and Anne Hutchinson were banished from Massachusetts. Their crimes were absolutely horrendous. You would not believe the sins that these people committed. That is sarcasm. Roger Williams just basically said, hey, we shouldn't mistreat Native Americans. Banished. Anne Hutchinson was a preacher, and she was a woman. Banished. So that's why they were banished. Together they formed Rhode Island, and they believed that religion should be separate from the government. If you disobey their religion, they didn't necessarily believe that the government should banish you or behead you or throw you in jail or whatever else the government can do for punishment. So Connecticut is going to be another colony that's formed out of Massachusetts. Thomas Hooker also disapproved of the Puritans. He did not believe their government was great. He formed Connecticut to separate the church from the state, and he wrote the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which is the first written constitution in the Americas. Now, a constitution is just basically saying how the government should work. It allowed men who were not members of the church to be able to vote. So even if you weren't religious, you got to vote. It was more of a democratic form of government. And here's a real STAAR question about New England. So go ahead and pause and answer this. And another one. So the mid-Atlantic colonies. Again, this is the next region of the 13 colonies that the British founded. So their common characteristics between all of these colonies, they all still had cold winters. They had workable soil, though, so that means they were able to farm. It was still a little bit mountainous, so it made big-scale farming a little bit harder, but they did have a longer growing season and warmer summers than New England. So they're known as the breadbasket. That's what they did for money. They grew wheats, oats, barley, etc. And all of these are used to create bread, which is why they were named the breadbasket. So some of these colonies will follow. Also make sure that you are filling out PER, political, economic, religious. Why were each of these colonies founded? First one's going to be New York. It was settled by the Dutch, like we talked about in our last lecture. Once the Dutch prince came to England, this area was ceded to England. The English Dutch Duke of York officially took over the area, so it was named New York after the York Duke. It becomes a major city for trade. I mean, just look at this map. Do you see how many rivers boats could access in order to trade? It's crazy. And New Jersey splits off from New York. So Pennsylvania is the next colony that's founded. It's founded by William Penn. He names it after himself. It's Penn's Woods. This is a part of the Quaker. This is the Quaker section of the colonies. They were being religiously persecuted, so they founded Pennsylvania in order to have religious freedom. Now, these Quakers were very, very tolerant of others. They did not believe in slavery. They believed in full equality, and women were treated equal to men. Actually, the first female doctor was a Quaker, and slavery, again, was not allowed. Philadelphia is known as the city of brotherly love because everyone loves everyone there. It's the first city to be actually planned out before it was built. You can see in the top left corner, all of the grid lines are perfect. It's just straight streets, whereas other cities were just kind of, you threw a church where you could find a land, you threw a house near that. So they weren't planned out. This city becomes very important to our country's history, and we'll talk about that later. So the southern colonies. The common characteristics of the southern colonies, they had warm, rainy, fertile soil, which all made it very, very great to grow crops on a large scale. So the economy is going to be cash crops. Tobacco became very, very big because tobacco was new in the New World. They didn't have that in Europe. Rice, indigo, and later cotton also are very big to the economy of the South. Some of the colonies within this region are, remember to write your PERs, Virginia. Jamestown was in 1607, the first successful English colony formed in America. Virginia was named after the first English child born in the Americas, who was named after Queen Elizabeth. She was called a Virginia because she never married. Virginia Trading Company is who formed Virginia. They created trade between the colonies in Great Britain. Tobacco Think about that cheer whenever they say, when I say whatever, you say whatever. When I say Virginia, your first thought should be tobacco. When I say Virginia, you say tobacco. Because 9 times out of 10, if they ask a question about the Virginia Trading Company on STAAR, it's going to be about tobacco. Problems with settlement. There were so many mosquito-borne illnesses, and the Europeans had no tolerance to these illnesses. They had never seen them before. A lot of people died as a result. Jamestown also had very, very unclean water. It was very swampy. The Native Americans in Virginia and the Virginian colonists attacked each other constantly. They were constantly at war. They also did not have supplies in Jamestown, and the people there refused to grow crops in the beginning. This led to a no work, no eat policy having to be created. So many of these colonists were blacksmiths, not farmers. They thought they were above farming, and they died of starvation because they refused to farm. They would rather wait on ships to bring supplies from England. So James Smith created a no work, no eat policy. If these colonists did not begin to farm, they were not given supplies from England, and they would die of starvation, and many of them did. So here's a STAAR question. North and South Carolina, these are 2 other colonies in the South. A charter was given to 8 lords to form these 2 colonies. The major city is going to be Charleston. It's named after King Charles. Shocking. Looking at the map, why would this be a good port city? Look at all those long coastlines. What could dock there? Boats. The economy of North and South Carolina mainly was rice. This is a lot of swampy areas, so it made for good rice paddy fields. And indigo, again, same thing. But another thing is the slave trade. Charleston became the port for slaves to come in from Africa. Here's another STAAR question. Maryland. Lord Baltimore founded Maryland, a safe haven for Catholics facing religious persecution in England. Georgia was named after King George, founded out as a form of charity. This was a debtor's prison. So back in this time period, people in England, if you owed a lot of money, you would go to prison and serve your time. And that's how they kept people from going into debt. Well, now those debtors, instead of going to jail with violent criminals, could just go to Georgia and start a new life. So it is a colony of criminals. Here's another STAAR question. And